Welcome, everybody, back to the Nuggets of Gold podcast and YouTube channel. Today, we're going to be talking about Dee Ford, and there's been some very encouraging reports about Dee Ford in practice. Last year, we talked a lot about him and potentially being a guy that could retire at the end of the year, and that is not the case at all. And apparently, he looks pretty much at full strength at this point. The pads have been put on in training camp, so this is a really encouraging sign for all 49er fans. And you're talking about maybe the deepest kind of unit on the team is the defensive line. You're going to have a chance to not only have Ford in the rotation, but allow Ford to specifically only exclusively be used in pass rushing situations. So Aiden, what is just your overall thoughts and what do you think the impact is on bringing D back and having him able to play in these pass rushing situations?
Yeah, I think that we talked about it last episode. Anything that you get from Dee Ford at this point is just icing on the cake. He's a guy who, like you mentioned, a lot of people thought he could have been done and completely retired. Lots of vague reports about that back injury, and that's something that can definitely derail your entire career. So to hear that he's doing better and playing well during practice is an awesome sign, not only for the 49ers, but for him. I'm sure that was super tough for him to go through. But in terms of what it brings the 49ers, it's huge. Like you mentioned, this 49ers defensive line is probably not as top heavy as it was in 2019, but it is deeper. I think that we mentioned before the episode, a guy like Kentavious Street, who is a good player, is probably going to get cut. He's probably not going to make the rotation. And that just speaks to how deep this position group is. And as we saw during 2019, that's the key to this 49ers defense. We thrive based on rushing the passer, and our DBs get to sit back and play more cover three. Obviously, we're going to play a little bit more man with the addition of DeMeco Ryans. And obviously, like Verrett can do more man stuff than Sherman can now. But I think having a guy who can pass rush the way that Dee Ford can, it's going to open stuff up for Bosa. It's going to open stuff up for Ebukam, who can now do more of what he's probably better at, more run stopping, more similar to that Eric Armstead type mold. But I think it's huge. It gives the Niners something that they didn't think that they were going to get, and they signed some guys this offseason, guys like Arden Key, who thought could maybe replicate that Dee Ford role. But Arden Key is having an awesome camp. Dee Ford is now coming back. They just have more bodies who can do more different things, and that's huge for this 49ers defense.
I like the guys you brought up. Samson Ebukam, I think he's a guy that will probably be most used on the edge in base situations and base downs, running heavy type of situations. And then you look at, obviously Nick Bosa, Eric Armstead, Javon Kinlaw, and Dee Ford is like that other guy on third down. But look at the backup players on this line. One, you get Eric Armstead to kick inside, and we are pretty high advocates of having him play inside, having him not be lined out outside. Because yes, he is a tremendous run defender off the edge, but if you put him into like a 3-tech or like a 1-tech, he pretty much commands a double team every single time. So that is a huge win, not only for just the whole defense, but especially for Bosa, who will be lined up next to him sometimes. And then Javon Kinlaw as well, who that's a huge deal if he gets to line up inside next to Armstead, because there's a very good chance that he's going to be one-on-one with the guard or the center or whatever the case is. And then you look at, you brought up Arden Key. Arden Key and Mo Hurst were basically signed over from the Raiders. And I don't know if you heard John Lynch's comments on it, but it's pretty funny. He's like, yeah, I don't really know how those guys got out there. But yeah, we signed them. And so they have them. They have Kevin Givens, DJ Jones, Zach Kerr on the inside. And then you have Samson Ebukam, Arden Key. Like, this is a really, really deep group. So it is really encouraging to see all this stuff about Dee Ford. But I think the best part is he might be placed in more of a role where he doesn't have to, be a guy that is. And in 2019, it's not like he was on the field all the time. He obviously got injured that year. He only had 6.5 sacks, which his final year in the Chiefs, he had 13. So it was a big drop off. But when he was on the field on third down, and they would use him all over the defensive line, his speed was a tremendous asset, and we're going to see that again this year. So that's something that is really, really encouraging for. And yeah, I'm excited for it. I don't know if you saw the reports, Aiden, but he's been lining up inside a little bit. They've been using a lot of stunts and stuff with him in there. So it's really encouraging to see that. If you have him and Bosa lined up next to each other, like I don't know if you remember the Vikings playoff game where they got a sack and it was like, oh yeah, there's no way that a guard's going to be able to stop that. The amount of stunts and versatility that they have throughout this defensive line is really impressive because you're going to be able to put guys that are starting level players in the game for 20, 30 snaps. I mean, some of these guys are going to play like 15 snaps that could probably start on other NFL teams. And they're just going to be, going up there, and it's going to be a lot of substitutions on the defensive line, probably outside of Nick Bosa and probably Armstead as well. But you're going to see guys subbed in and out all the time. And you're going to see really, really hopefully a healthier team because of that. And definitely a team that's, ready to go on every single down, that's not, not hurting in terms of like stamina, like not like guys like tapping out and stuff. Like you're not going to see that much this year. So the versatility and the depth of this defensive line it might be unmatched throughout the whole NFL. This defensive line is so deep. And Aiden, you brought up not as top heavy. Absolutely. You lose a guy like DeForest Buckner, you're going to feel those losses for years to come. But this is the way to kind of go and correct that, in my opinion. And man, is it encouraging that Dee Ford is healthy. Because that is a huge difference on third down. That makes the 49ers that much more scary. And you didn't really mention the corners that much, but the corner room's pretty thin. So you might have a couple games where there's backup corners in there that aren't very good players or rookies. You might have Ambry Thomas back there, and it might, he might struggle a little bit. So if you have a guy that like Dee Ford who's screaming off the edge every time that the quarterback's going to feel every single play that he's dropping back, it makes a huge difference. So I'm really pumped for this. But anything else you wanted to add on Dee?
Yeah, I think kind of to leave this segment off, you go through the list of these 49ers defensive linemen. Every single one of them has something to prove. Dee Ford, people thought he was going to retire, overpaid. Samson Ebukam, gaining a much bigger role, was given a pretty big contract for what he did with the Rams. Kinlaw, hurt last year, wasn't Defoe. Zach Kerr, DJ Jones, Maurice Hurst are all on 1-year deals. Guys that may be with the Niners next year, maybe not, or trying to parlay this into a bigger contract. Armstead gets slandered for that contract. He's going to be looking for something to prove. Nick Bosa coming off the injury, showing that he can be the player that he was in 2019 is going to be super interesting. And guys like Arden Key, who have bounced around a couple different teams, I think that's huge for this 49ers defensive line, for them to be able to look at each other and be like, we see kindred spirits. We're going to get after people because we have to. We have stuff to prove, and that's dangerous on the defensive line. And I'm super excited to see them wreak havoc.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to see the depth and full display throughout the season because you'll see guys competing for the roster spots. The thing is, there's a very good chance like a guy like Evan Givens kind of emerges that we aren't even talking about today. That's like, oh, this guy's an absolute beast. He's an undrafted free agent. He tears it up. So there's a very good chance to be other names added to this list. So really, really encouraging stuff, and cannot be more excited that Dee Ford is finally healthy.